last week we saw how Jehovah connected his response to Pharaoh's actions to the covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. It's imperative that we see the connection of what Jehovah is doing in regards to his covenant. The reason is that the result of the redemption from Egypt and the subsequent covenant given on Mount Sinai is connected to the covenant of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. That's what we should be understanding here, is that what we see here in Exodus, what God is about to do in redeeming his people, is connected to the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The covenant that he enters in with Moses on Mount Sinai and his people, that covenant is directly connected to what the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so this is what we saw in Exodus chapter 6 last week, is God stressing this covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And what is the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob based on? The answer is faith. Believing God and his promises and desiring to carry them out. To those that have faith, like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, Jehovah provides redemption. To those that he redeems, he provides the way to be blessed in this life. And that answer is connected to keeping the commandments of God. So this is what we're supposed to start seeing, is that all this is based on faith. God redeems those that have faith, and God provides the way to live to those that operate according to faith as well, who he's redeemed. Jehovah wants Moses and the children of Israel to understand that what he is doing here, his redemptive work, is connected to the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's what last week was all about. It was an emphasis. Not the first time we've seen that, and not the second time, but multiple times we've seen this. So again and again, Jehovah goes back to this truth in the book of Exodus. This week, we'll continue through Exodus chapter 6, starting in verse 10. We're going to do the entire chapter here today, the rest of it. We'll see that it goes fairly quickly because of the genealogy. But what we're going to see here is Jehovah charged Moses to go to Pharaoh and tell him that he needs to send Israel forth out of Egypt. Moses responds with hesitation. We then see a number of verses that deal with the genealogy of three of Jacob's sons, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, with a specific emphasis on the family of Levi down to Moses and Aaron. Finally, the chapter ends with Jehovah's charge yet again to Moses and Aaron to go to Pharaoh. Basically, a repeat of what we're going to start with beginning with today. And so, with that kind of general overview, let's go ahead and let's pray and ask Jehovah to bless our time here. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the opportunity again to consider the truths of the book of Exodus. Father, as we have journeyed through this book, Father, there are so many insights that we have gleaned, truths we can put together. And Father, just the emphasis that we see here connected to the covenant you made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Father, it's important for us to see your actions in the book of Exodus connected to those basic truths. Father, I pray that as we continue through chapter 6 here today, that you give us understanding, that we would be able to put pieces together, see the significance here, see the emphasis, and walk away with the right understanding. I pray all this in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, so go to verse 10 of Exodus chapter 6. Verse 10 says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Go in, speak unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land." Now remember the context of what immediately precedes this passage. Go back and take a look at verse 9 again. It says, "And Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened not unto Moses, for anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage." So Jehovah had given Moses the words to say in verses 6 through 8. So to remind you what we went over last week. Moses then, according to verse 9, delivered that message to the children of Israel. But they rejected that message. Moses then returns to Jehovah, and we pick it up here in verse 10, where with Jehovah telling Moses, that he now needs to go to Pharaoh once again. And Moses is to deliver the same message to him, that he needs to let the children of Israel go forth out of his land. Remember that the Hebrew reads more forceful here, that Pharaoh was to send forth the children of Israel out of Egypt. So again, the translators have chosen to translate this in a passive way, let my children go, or let the people go, but it is send forth the children of Israel, is the idea of here, out of Egypt. And so this is the same message that Moses and Aaron had delivered earlier. The same message that resulted in Pharaoh decreeing that straw should be removed from the bricks. Remember, Moses and Aaron went in, they delivered the message, and then the result was, as Pharaoh said, no more straw for you. Still produce the same amount of brick. The bricks need the same quality and quantity. They should not diminish. Verse 12. And Moses spake before the Lord, saying, Behold, the children of Israel have not hearkened unto me. How then shall Pharaoh hear me, who am of uncircumcised lips? See, here we can see that Moses responds to Jehovah that he does not think it will do any good to deliver the message to Pharaoh. First, Moses declares the fact that he just went to the children of Israel and they did not listen. He's referring back to what we read in verse 9. Again, verse 9. And Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened not unto Moses, for of anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. And so Moses is coming back here in verse 12 and saying, Behold, the children of Israel have not hearkened unto me. So at this point, I think it's important to review what Moses told the children of Israel. And so go back to verses 6 through 8 here. Let me read those again, because it's very easy to just read over the things and not realize some of the subtleties that are going on here. Verse 6, it says, Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm, and with great judgments, and I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you unto the land concerning that which I did swear to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you for an heritage. I am the Lord. And so this is what Moses was to deliver to the people. With that in mind, let us go back to see what Jehovah instructed Moses as part of his first message to the children of Israel. So hold your spot there and go back to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3, take a look at verse 15. So just to remind you what it was before that Moses delivered. Verse 15 of Exodus chapter 3. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me unto you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial unto all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say unto them, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, and of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I have surely visited you, and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt unto the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. So here is what Moses was to say to the children of Israel and to the elders. And so we see here the message. It's important to note that although the first message that Moses delivered to the children of Israel uses slightly different words, it's essentially the same message. And although the children of Israel received Moses' first message, they ultimately rejected it once Pharaoh made their lives worse. Once they connected to what Pharaoh had done, to what Moses and Aaron had said to Pharaoh, they said, wait a second, this can't be the will of God, because my life just got worse. And so they ultimately ended up rejecting what Moses said. Moses then, in Exodus chapter 6, the passage we're dealing with today, goes back to the children of Israel with basically the same message. And the result is not surprising, is they rejected the message once again. Moses, even though he was initially likely very encouraged by the words of Jehovah in the first part of Exodus 6, the words we focused on last week, it becomes clear when we get to verses 11 and 12 that Moses' attitude has changed once again. I do not think Moses went to the children of Israel in verse 9 with a doubting attitude. I believe he was edified. He was encouraged. He was confident that the children of Israel were going to listen because God had just said, just wait what I'm going to do now. Remember back in verse 1. Then the Lord said unto Moses, now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he shall let them go, and with a strong hand he shall drive them out of his land. And Moses then hears the words of God talking about how I am going to keep my covenant. I am Jehovah. And Moses, I believe, goes to his people and says, God is going to deliver us. He's promised. He's going to bring forth, make good on his promises that he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He goes to them with confidence. But no matter that, the people reject the message, the same message that Moses delivered before, and I believe he comes back feeling dejected. And that's what we come to here in verses 10 and 11. Now, when Moses returns before Jehovah, Jehovah now tells him that he needs to go to Pharaoh and deliver the same message to Pharaoh that he delivered before. And so after going to the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and delivering the same message and becoming dejected, God now tells Moses, go back to Pharaoh and deliver the same message to him. So now what do you think Moses is going to think? Wait a second. Why do I think that Pharaoh is going to listen to me? Moses, being dejected, says, what? I just got back from delivering the same message to the children of Israel, your people, and they rejected me. He continues in verse 12, he says, how then shall Pharaoh hear me? Moses says it's not logical to think that Pharaoh is going to change his mind. It's not logical to think he's going to listen any more to me than the children of Israel refused to listen to me. Why do you think, God, that Pharaoh is going to have any different attitude? After all, I'm delivering the same message that I delivered before. And Pharaoh resulted in making life worse for the children of Israel. Second of all, Moses says at the end of verse 12 that he is of uncircumcised lips. Take a look at verse 12. And Moses spake before the Lord, saying, behold, the children of Israel have not hearkened unto me. How then shall Pharaoh hearken or hear me, who am of uncircumcised lips? Now this is an interesting phrase to use. Now there's no way to get around the words that are being used. It's a very literal translation. The same word is used to contrast those that are circumcised versus uncircumcised in passages like when God gave it to Abraham. The best way to understand what it is saying here in the text is to first understand what circumcision stood for, or what it stands for. It connects us back once again to Abraham, who was instructed to circumcise himself in his household as a sign of participating in the covenant. Thus, those that were circumcised were those that identified with God and his ways. So I don't think this is difficult to understand. Those that were circumcised identified with the covenant. Those that participated in the covenant were separate from those that refused to be circumcised. So it kind of ends up forming two groups. Those that were circumcised, they believed in God's covenant. They were circumcised because they identified with the covenant. And then those that were outside the covenant and they refused the sign associated with it. And so there's this idea of two separate groups. Moses, like his brethren, the children of Israel, was circumcised. This means that Moses had a connection to the children of Israel. And consequently, this bond should have given Moses credibility in his charge to them. And so part of what Moses is saying here in our passage is that I went to the people that were circumcised like me, and they wouldn't listen. And I'm going to another group of people that don't identify with me. So circumcision or uncircumcision was a picture or a symbol for a separate or distinct group of people. When Moses says that he had uncircumcised lips to Pharaoh, it is like he is saying he is not approaching or communicating with Pharaoh from a position of being like him or like his people. And so even though it's the opposite side, it is saying that he's going to Pharaoh from a position of being unlike Pharaoh. that there is no basis for Pharaoh to consider him or to listen to him. Moses doesn't have any bond or connection to Pharaoh. So Moses is saying in verse 12 that the children of Israel did not listen to him, so why would Pharaoh listen to him? Especially considering that Moses is not going to be able to say something that Pharaoh will be able to relate to. He has no reason to listen to Moses. He is a stranger. He is a foreigner. He is a Hebrew, a different person, a different type of person. Basically, in Hebrew language, like one to them that is uncircumcised. And so it's like Moses is trying to use language of God. So he realized I am like an uncircumcised person to him, like he's uncircumcised to me. So it's like it's detestable. And so it's more on the language of detestable to the ones that views like as a person that is unreasonable to him, type of a thing, because he doesn't identify with him. So in short, Moses is saying that if Israel didn't listen, the children of Israel didn't listen to him with a bond, there is no reason to think that Pharaoh will listen to him, and that this is basically a waste of time. What good, Moses is saying here to God, what good could come out of it? What benefit could come out of this? Moses here is clearly on an emotional roller coaster ride. 1 minute he's operating in obedience, the next he is doubting what he is doing. It's hard to fault Moses here on the surface. It is easy to get discouraged when it seems like no one is willing to listen to you, or you truly believe that no one will listen to you. And that's the reality that we work in our lives. If you don't think someone's going to listen to you, it's hard to go talk to them. If you don't think they're going to listen, why bother? It's that's why Moses is saying here to God, why should I do this? If the children of Israel, my kinsmen, wouldn't listen to me, why should I think someone that's different than me, that has no basis or reason to listen to me, is going to listen to me? Verse 13. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron. So here we get to understand that Aaron is with Moses. And gave them a charge unto the children of Israel and unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Here's God's answer. Again, let me read this. Moses just tried to provide an excuse. Verse 13 is the answer. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, and gave them a charge, or a commandment is what that word means, unto the children of Israel, and unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. So God basically commanded Moses and Aaron to say, tell my people I'm taking them out, and tell Pharaoh you're letting them go. That was God's answer. See, here we see Jehovah's response to Moses' objection to go to Pharaoh. This is in some way similar to what we saw as we considered Moses' response in chapter 5 to Jehovah's answer in chapter 6. So let me remind you what I'm talking about here. Go back to Exodus chapter 5 and verse 22. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, so this is after the people rejected his message and said, let Jehovah judge you. Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people, neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. Remember, Moses thought that God was going to start delivering his people. He never understood that God was going to allow Pharaoh to let things get worse. And so how does Jehovah respond to Moses when he goes back to God here at the last part of chapter 5? Well, that's what we see Exodus 6:1. Then the Lord said unto Moses, now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. And so, rather than becoming angry with Moses, rather than rebuking Moses, Jehovah responds with how this is all according to his plan. We see a similar response back here in Exodus 6 and verse 13. Jehovah does not respond with getting angry. He does not respond with rebuking Moses. Rather, he charges both Moses and Aaron to give the children of Israel and Pharaoh the same message. The children of Israel need to hear that Jehovah has heard them, and he's going to deliver them. Pharaoh needs to hear the message that he is to send the children of Israel out of Egypt. So God says to Moses, you have the words you need to tell both groups of people. Keep giving them the message. This is what they need to hear. There's no reason to change the message. The message is correct, and it's not going to change. They need instead to get on board with the truth of the message. Jehovah is saying here to Moses and Aaron, you need no further instruction. Just keep on keeping on. Jehovah is not backing down. There's no reason for Moses and Aaron to stop. Jehovah is not changing his mind. Let's go back to, let's now continue on in the text here, and some of us will come back together here a little bit. Verse 14, which at first may seem a little odd that we're moving on to verse 14. These be the heads of their fathers' houses. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Hanok and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. These be the families of Reuben. Now from verses 14 to 25, and possibly one could argue down to verse 27, is a long genealogy. Let me first work through this, and then step back and try to understand why this is here and its significance. So verse 14 starts off with the phrase, these be the heads of their fathers' houses. These be the heads of their fathers' houses. In other words, with this instruction, it is clear, at least from the onset, that this is about helping the reader to understand who were the significant leaders or the heads of the households with the children of Israel. Now we've moved on, obviously, from Reuben. Reuben no longer is alive, and even his sons are no longer alive. But the result of these households are well in strength or well represented within the children of Israel as a whole. Now verse 14 first starts off with the sons of Reuben, who it says in the text was the firstborn of Israel. Now this wording should not surprise us, because Reuben was in fact the firstborn of the sons of Jacob. 4 sons of Reuben are listed. And so we see here in the text, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. So these are his 4 sons. Now what is being stated here is that Reuben's 4 sons became prominent families within the children of Israel. That's what's being said here, verse 15. And the sons of Simeon, Jemuel, and Jamin, and Ohad, and Jachin, and Zohar, and Shaul, the sons of the son of a Canaanitish woman. These are the families of Simeon. So next we have Simeon listed. Simeon was the second son of Jacob. So it's not surprising to see him listed as second in the series here. We have Reuben, and then we have Simeon. And Simeon's 7 sons are listed here. And like the other genealogy accounts, there is record that Shaul was born of a Canaanitish woman. The 7 sons here would have become prominent families among the children of Israel. And so none of this here necessarily is surprising. The order we have here, the sons that are listed here. Now we move on to verse 16. And these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations, Gershon and Kohath and Merari. And the years of the life of Levi were 137 years. So next we see Levi and his sons. Levi was the 3rd son of Jacob. So like Simeon, it's not a surprise to see him listed next. Levi had 3 sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The verse ends with listing that Levi lived to be 137 years old. Now we'll consider that in a moment. But realize as well, just on the onset, that he lived quite a while, 137 years. Verse 17. Moving on, next verse. The sons of Gershom, Libni, and Shimi, according to their families. So now when we get to verse 17, the pattern has changed. We would have expected Jacob's 4th son, Judah, to be listed, and his sons, and so forth. However, rather than Judah, we see that the genealogy for Levi's first son, Gershon, is listed. And Gershon has 2 sons. And so you see here a slight shift in the pattern. Moving on, verse 18. And the sons of Kohath, Amram, and Izhar, and Hebron, and Uzziel. And the years of the life of Kohath were 133 years. Now here in verse 18, we move to Levi's second son, Kohath. So it's like we have a new pattern that's been established with verse 17 and 18. Kohath had 4 sons. And then at the end of verse 18, we see the record that Kohath lived 133 years. Verse 19. And the sons of Merari, says here, Mahali and Mushi. These are the families of Levi according to their generations. And so in 19, we see Levi's third son, Merari, listed. Merari had 2 sons that had families follow them. And so we see the things that are listed here. And we see here the emphasis as well, the families of Levi according to their generations. So there's an emphasis on Levi. Now move on to verse 20. I know a lot of names got to keep track of here. And Amram took him Jochebed, his father's sister, to wife. And she bare him Aaron and Moses. And the years of the life of Amram were 137 years. Now in verse 20, the genealogy takes another shift lower. So remember, the last verses, we looked at Levi's 3 sons and the sons of them. In verse 20, we take another shift lower in the genealogy. Remember that in verse 18, Kohath had 4 sons listed. Here, Kohath's first son, Amram, has details of his genealogy listed. Amram is first stated to have taken his father's sister, Jochebed, to be his wife. So this would have been Kohath's sister. Now this is significant for 2 reasons. First, it tells us that these genealogy records do not always list all the children. Many times the daughters are not listed as the text is concerned with the heads of the families or the males. Second, it tells us that Amram's descendants were purely from the tribe of Levi. It is consistent with the statement we saw back in Exodus chapter 4 and verse 14. So hold your spot here and go back to Exodus chapter 4. Now remember, there's a curious statement back here. Exodus chapter 4 and verse 14. This is when God was angry with how Moses was making excuses at the burning bush. Exodus 4 and verse 14. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. So remember this phrase here, Aaron the Levite. Well, of course, Aaron was a Levite. He was his brother. Moses was also a Levite. It's like Jehovah is saying that both Moses and Aaron are pure Levites. In verse 20 of Exodus chapter 6, the text tells us that Amram had 2 sons, Aaron and Moses. And so we see here this emphasis that they had a mother that was also from the tribe of Levi. And Moses and Aaron were pure Levites in that sense. So the verse concludes as well the statement that Amram lived to be 137 years old. And so we see here some patterns developing here. We're going lower in the genealogy. We see some ages that are listed here. Let's move on the text here in Exodus chapter 6 in verse 21. And the sons of Izhar, Korah, and Nepheg, and Zichri. So verse 21, it jumps back up a genealogy level to go back to Kohath's second son. His first son was Amram, and his second son was Izhar. Izhar had 3 sons. We see them listed here, Korah, Nepheg, and Zichri. Verse 22. And the sons of Uzziel, Mishael, and Elizaphan, and Zithri. In verse 22, Kohath's 4th son, Uzziel, is listed. Now, what happened to Kohath's third son, Hebron? I'm not sure why it's not listed here. I couldn't find anything, and I probably just don't have good enough commentaries of some people that have made some connections here. However, we remember Kohath had 4 sons, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Here we find an emphasis on the fourth son, and so we can see that Uzziel had 3 sons, and they're listed here: Mishael, Elzaphan, and Zithri. Verse 23. Moving on to the next verse. And Aaron took him Elisheba, daughter of Abinadab, sister of Naashon, to wife, and she bare him Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So here in verse 23, the text goes down another genealogy line with Levi. So we've had Levi, we've gone down to Kohath, we've gone down to Amram, and we've gone down to Aaron, and now we're dealing with Amram's oldest son, Aaron, and we see that Aaron, like his father, is listed who he had for a wife. Now, according to the book of Numbers, Naashon, the son of Abinadab, was from the tribe of Judah. So here we see some intermingling with the house of Judah with the house of Levi. Now, the Levites had no type of instruction to say they could not intermarry with the different tribes. The other tribes were supposed to stay within the same tribes. But we see in the verse here, verse 23, Aaron and Elisheba had 4 sons. So I recognize these names here because they come here a number of times in the scriptures. We have Nadab and Abihu, who God judged because of strange fire. We have Eleazar and Ithamar, who ended up taking the charge from Aaron with the high priesthood. And we move on here to verse 24. And the sons of Korah, Asir, and Elkanah, and Abiasaph. These are the families of the Korahites. Now, verse 24 shifts from the firstborn of Amram, which was Aaron, to the firstborn of Amram's brother, Izhar. Amram and Izhar were the first 2 sons of Kohath. Amram's firstborn was Aaron, according to verse 20, and Izhar's firstborn was Korah, according to verse 21. So we can see here in verse 24 that Korah had 3 sons, and we see the rebellion of Korah in Numbers 16, but his sons survive, is what Numbers tell us later on as well, though. So, moving on to verse 25. So there's some different things here. I think some of this is to set some understanding of who these people were. Verse 25. And Eleazar, Aaron's son, took him one of the daughters of Putiel to wife, and she bare him Phinehas. These are the heads of the fathers of the Levites according to their families. So here we see the text now takes the genealogy down yet another level within Aaron's line. So Aaron had Eleazar, and Eleazar then has Phinehas. So Aaron's son Eleazar is called out here, and how he took Putiel to be his wife, and Eleazar is said to have Phinehas as his son. And so here we have the high priest line that goes down further. The verse then concludes with how these are the heads of the fathers of the Levites. So it's like the text is saying that these are the prominent and most important men among the Levites, or the families of Levi. Now, other scriptures give additional names for the families of Levi. Now, we're not going to go there, but if you were to turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 6, you would see other names within the families of Levi. So it's not like these are the only prominent names within the tribe of Levi. However, something's being called out here. So that fact alone tells us that there's something being said or emphasized within the text here. This is not saying these are the only descendants of Levi, nor is it saying that these are the only important individuals from Levi. In addition, this account is odd in how the genealogy only goes through the first 3 sons of Jacob and then stops there. We will see after a few comments on Moses and Aaron in verse 26 to 27, the text reverts back to the narrative that we saw back before the genealogy was listed. So thus there's another number of questions at this point. The first question to address has to do with the overall genealogy of Jacob's sons. Why is it that only 3 sons are listed here? Well, I think part of the answer is connected to stepping back and consider the emphasis here. The emphasis of the text is clearly on Jacob's third son, Levi. Now, although Reuben and Simeon, Jacob's sons, are listed, neither genealogy here goes any further. It only goes into the genealogy of Levi. So the text is trying to say the focus is on Levi. So walk away with that to start with, is the text deals with Levi. The emphasis is on Levi. But I think the reason that Reuben and Simeon are listed is because part of this goes back to Jacob, which ties us back to the covenant given back to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. Levi's line is connected to the covenant and his promises. That's part we're trying to say here is Levi is part of the fulfillment of the promises that goes back to Jacob. But within the house of Levi, the text is trying to help us understand that not all of the house of Levi is the same. Not all the house of Levi is the same. That some men were elevated above other men. And the text does this by listing out the ages of some, but not others. For the three sons of Jacob that are listed, only Levi has his age listed that he died, 137 years old. This sets Levi apart from Reuben and Simeon. Of Levi's three sons, remember Levi had three sons. Only Kohath, one of his three sons, had his age of 133 listed. This sets Kohath apart from Gershon and Merari. Of Kohath's four sons, only Amram has his age of 137 listed. This sets Amram apart from Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. So it's like God is trying to say, I'm trying to point out certain individuals that are elevated above the others. Among the 12 sons, Levi is set apart. Among Levi's son, only Kohath is set apart. Of Kohath's sons, only one son, Amram, is set apart. And so Amram is set apart from Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. However, notice that three individuals that have ages listed, Levi's age was what? 137? Kohath was 133, and Amram was 137 again. So with Amram's age matching Levi's, both being 137, it's like the text is saying that Amram is closely connected with Levi. There's a connection there with the ages. That Amram is the pure stock of Levi. It's like the statement that Jehovah made to Moses that Aaron's brother was a Levite. Moses, you're a Levite. Aaron is also a Levite. And so Amram is being emphasized here as well. And consequently, his two sons, Aaron and Moses. Now, interestingly, in the text, it is only Aaron's genealogy that is emphasized. Moses' genealogy here is not emphasized. We do find Moses in 1 Chronicles. But Aaron, his son Eleazar, and Eleazar's son Phinehas is emphasized. So it's like the emphasis he sets the stage here for is the line of the high priest. So this genealogy here is not saying the other sons of Jacob are not important. Reuben, Simeon, and the other sons are not listed, and the others not listed. This is about the emphasis and the importance on the house of Levi. Why? Because Jehovah is using them to bring his covenant promises to reality. It is Moses and Aaron that will lead his people out of Egypt. That's what God's trying to say here. It is Moses and Aaron that will lead his people. It is Moses and Aaron that are Jehovah's spokesmen. It is Moses and Aaron that will show the children of Israel the way. Now this is further emphasized by the next verse. Take a look here. So hopefully this stuff will come together here for you. Exodus chapter 6, pick it up in verse 26 where we left off. These are that Aaron and Moses, to whom the Lord said, bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies. Now when the text says that these are that Aaron and Moses, it is pointing us back to the genealogy that we just read. So in other words, these are that Moses and Aaron that you just read about in this emphasized genealogy. That Moses and Aaron were not just some random individuals that Jehovah chose. They were rather from individuals that were faithful to Jehovah. So God is emphasizing these certain individuals and then saying Moses and Aaron came from these men that I've elevated, these men that I'm emphasizing here in the genealogy. The purpose of the genealogy above is helping us understand that Jehovah saw good in the house of Levi, that Jehovah saw righteousness in the house of Levi, specifically among certain individuals. We considered and we saw this when we looked back at Amram and Jochebed in Exodus chapter 2 in the birth of Moses. Remember what we saw back there. The faithfulness of Moses' parents. Well, Moses here is revealing here with the genealogy that his parents and his parents' parents and his parents' parents going back were faithful to Jehovah. And so these are the Moses and Aaron that God chose. And according to verse 26, it is these two individuals, descendants of Amram and Kohath and Levi, that God chose to use. It is these two men that Jehovah charged to lead his people out. Again, verse 26. It says, "These are that Aaron and Moses, to whom the Lord said, Bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies." And verse 27 continues. "These," that be Moses and Aaron, "are they which spake to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring out the children of Israel from Egypt. These are that Moses and Aaron." And so in addition to leading the children of Israel, Moses and Aaron were also entrusted with speaking with Pharaoh. The text is trying to help us understand that Jehovah looked very favorably upon Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron were of the stock of Levi. Again, we see the emphasis at the end of verse 27. These are that Moses and Aaron. Verses 26 and 27 helps us put the exclamation mark at the end, or the emphasis at the end of the genealogy to help us get the point. This is that Moses and Aaron. This is the individuals that God chose out of the stock of Levi. He purposely did this. Now, there's a little more to say about this, but first let's consider the last verses of chapter 6. Let me read the last 3 verses. It says, "And it came to pass on the day when the Lord spake unto Moses in the land of Egypt, that the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I am Jehovah. Speak thou unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say unto thee. And Moses said before the Lord, Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh hearken unto me?" So here we see, with the last 3 verses, similar language to what we saw up in verses 10 through 13. Let me read those again. 10 through 13. "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Go in, speak unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land. And Moses spake before the Lord, saying, Behold, the children of Israel have not hearkened unto me. How then shall Pharaoh hear me, who am of uncircumcised lips? And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, and gave them in charge unto the children of Israel, and unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt." So here we see at the end of chapter 6, similar language we saw up earlier before the genealogy. So the text that immediately preceded the genealogy is the same text as what followed the genealogy. This is important to recognize. We basically have a sandwich of theological ideas here, as we have presented. So think of like bookends or a sandwich, 2 pieces of bread, and you have something in the middle between it. On both sides, we have Jehovah instructing Moses and Aaron to tell Pharaoh that he needs to send forth the children of Israel out of Egypt. Moses on both sides says, what makes you think that Pharaoh will listen to the same message this time? God, what makes you think that? Now, I do not believe the same thing happened twice. I believe that God is putting this record in here 2 times, separated by the genealogy. You see, Moses' words having uncircumcised lips further proves that this is a restatement of the passage in the middle of chapter 6. So what's going on here? When we see something like this in the text, here or elsewhere, it helps us understand that the truth in the middle is critical to help us understand the text from the outside or the text next to it. Said another way, the genealogy in the middle of the two bookends helps us understand the bookends. Sometimes the bookends help us understand what is in the middle, but here it's the other way around. Because we can read very easily into the narrative a character flaw in Moses and concurrently Aaron. That we can get to this point and think, when is Moses going to get his act together? This genealogy and the statements in verse 26 and verse 27 help us have the correct understanding of Moses and Aaron. It is saying that God chose Moses and Aaron for a reason. They are faithful men. They come from the tribe of Levi, who had Kohath, who had Amram, who had faithful Aaron and Moses. And out of Aaron came Eleazar and Phinehas, two also faithful men. When we look back at the text, we see how Eleazar and Phinehas acted. We see that faithfulness carried out. Now, we may not understand everything about these men, but God does. Moses himself may not fully get it either at this time, but God does. And that's the point that God is trying to call in the text here, is that he knows what he's doing, and he knows who he chose. He chose Moses and Aaron. God has chosen Moses and Aaron for a reason, and that is connected to who they are, how they have been raised, and the faith that has preceded them. And again, we need to put Scripture together. What we learned about Moses' parents, Amram and Jochebed, feeds into this text. They came from a line of faithful individuals. Now, all this is interesting considering what happened to Levi. Because when we get to this point, we're like, wait a second. How is it that God chose Levi? Why didn't he pick the tribe of Judah? Why didn't he pick a different tribe? Why didn't he pick one of the tribes of Joseph? And I believe this speaks because when you start realizing that the preceding explains the later, and the later helps us understand what happened before, or fill in the gaps, this tells us something about a change that must have happened with Levi. That he took the blessing and the prophecy declared by Jacob, his father, seriously. The proof is the genealogy that we have here in Exodus chapter 6. It is what Jehovah uses to squash our concern about Moses' hesitation. We may read what we find here in Exodus chapter 6 and go, wait a second, God, you chose the wrong men. God says, no, I didn't choose the wrong men. I choose the right men. They come from a faithful line, and they are faithful to me. You are not to question who I've chosen. This is the Moses and Aaron that came from the faithful line. Moses and Aaron is who Jehovah wants to go to Pharaoh to be a spokesman. It is Moses and Aaron that Jehovah will use to lead his people out of Egypt. Let me do my job, and let them do my job for me. And so I think this is part of a rebuke to those that are reasoning about Moses and Aaron, and not to look unfavorably upon him, even though Moses here is struggling, because you and I would struggle likewise. So I know there's a lot of words here. There's a lot of genealogy here. Hopefully this makes a little more sense. There's a lot to these passages here, and God is trying to help us understand the connection back to his covenant, the connection back to his word, the connection back to faithfulness and faithful men, and that's what he's moving forward with, and his will be accomplished. His message doesn't need to change. It is the message that is to Israel. It is the message to Pharaoh, and Moses and Aaron will faithfully deliver that until God chooses to act according to his purposes. Let's go ahead and let's pray. Heavenly